Welcome, everyone. This is the 26th episode of Let's Do Lunch, the business show where we talk about the business of streaming, entertainment, games, rights, tech, and music. Today is Monday, which is our streaming day. We have a terrific panel that I will introduce in just a moment. We also have some big news. We have a supporter of our show that I'm going to introduce to everybody today. Velocity is a 3-time Forbes Cloud 100 winner. They are a leading provider of industry-specific cloud and mobile software, driving digital transformation for the world's largest companies. Velocity serves companies in communications, media, entertainment, energy, utilities, insurance, health, and the government industries. Thanks to the great folks over at Velocity for helping to support Let's Do Lunch. All right, for today's show, we have the amazing Colin Dixon back. Colin is a chief analyst and founder at nScreenMedia. Colin will be joined by Erick Opeka, who is president of Cinedigm Networks, and Andrea Clarke Hall, who's business development at Tubi. Colin, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ned, and welcome everybody. We have a fun-filled discussion for you today. Our subject is the business of advertising supported video online, which as we know, and we'll be hearing more about this morning, as we know, has really had a fabulous time over the last few months, over the last few years, and particularly over the last couple of months as we've been sheltering at home. People have been really hunting around for that new content and have been discovering AVODs along the way. And I noticed that there was some new data from Hub Research this morning. And this is great news, I think, for AVOD, that actually the number of people saying that they are using AVOD has increased from 33% back in 2019 and is now 40%. And this survey was taken in April, so it definitely includes shelter at home viewing. So that's great news for the industry. And so I would like to invite Andrea and Erick to join us. So please unmute your mic and join us with your video. So we can get the discussion rolling. What I'd also like to admonish everybody, well, I'd like to recommend to everybody that they use their Q&A window to inject questions into the discussion as we go. I will try and work those into the discussion, and we'll definitely have a Q&A at the end. And the other thing I encourage you to do is to use the Q&A window to introduce yourself. Let everybody know, excuse me, not the Q&A, the chat window. Let everybody know that you're here and what you do. So with that, let me turn to Andrea and Erick. So I'm really, really fascinated as to how things are going for you guys during the shelter at home period. And so give us an idea of what sort of lift in usage you're seeing, and then we can maybe talk about the type of content that people are digging into. So why don't we start with you, Andrea? Give us, tell us how Tubi is doing.
Yeah, Ned, I think as you mentioned, this has been an amazing period for discovery of AVOD. Tubi's been hitting every single week. We hit a new milestone and a new record. You can imagine that our Tuesday morning team meetings are very exciting these days. And what is really interesting about it is that a huge percentage of those records are compromised new viewers. We're seeing new viewer growth like we've never seen before. So it's definitely a wonderful time for discovery of the AVOD market. And to answer the latter half of your question, what are people watching? They're watching everything. They're watching a ton. We've seen a really, really big, kind of strange fascination with pandemic-related movies, especially in the early days of quarantine. Our search terms for Contagion and any sort of pandemic-rated titles were through the roof. But we're also doing phenomenally well on kids and family titles. We have some awesome family movies. Right now we have Shrek, or in the month of April rather, we had Shrek. It blew out records because people are really hungry for that kind of content.
That's such a great movie too. Erick, so join in the conversation. Tell us how things going.
Sure. So I think, as we're seeing a lot of the same situation that I think most providers of AVOD and fast linear channels are seeing, which is a pretty sizable uptick in consumption over the last 60 days. I think we're seeing probably about 30 to 32% range, depending on the channel. Some channels we've seen more than 50% increases. In terms of content that's really working, I think we operate 15 different properties in different niches. But I think I would characterize them as comfort viewing has tended to be particularly popular. We launched the Bob Ross channel, which is sort of a hyper niche channel of the 800 or so Bob Ross episodes that have become sort of a culturally iconic, and that in the first 10 days has become our most popular of all channels in terms of consumption. So I think that kind of illustrates what's really working, which is things that are relaxing, meditative, enjoyable, that the family can watch together, given close quarters and everything. We're seeing that also on our family property Dove channel, which has really shown in terms of engagement, the most engagement per view of any channel, and that's predominantly movies and shows that families can safely watch together. So I think, not to say that doesn't mean people still aren't watching tons of horror, sci-fi, anime content, on other properties, but we think we're tending to see the longest engagement and watch time.
Maybe it'd be helpful. Could you just let us know what sort of content Cinedigm provides? Obviously, you've got the Con TV background there, but just tell us the channels that you own.
Sure. So out of our portfolio, Dove channel, which is faith and family co-viewing, Con TV, which is fandom, sci-fi, anime, action, Docurama, it's factual. Con TV Anime, which is a fork of Con TV, all anime. And then we have Hollypop, which is sort of K-pop and Asian music lifestyle. Combat Go, which is a combat sports, kind of global combat sports channel. Comedy Dynamics, which we distribute, which is basically stand-up comedy. Bamboo, which is Asian feature film and television primarily movies for Western audiences. Bob Ross, which we just mentioned, and several others. So those are the core ones that are up live and out there in the market today.
I can't imagine anything more calming than Bob Ross's silver vocals soothing you through this crisis. I'm going to be checking that out, you can bet. Andrea, have you seen, now one of the things that we saw at the beginning of this crisis was we saw a lot of focus on news. Has that shifted now? Are you still seeing unusually high news channel usage? Because obviously Tubi has a huge selection of content.
We don't actually have any news content. So
oh, you don't?
No. So Tubi is all entertainment content. Unlike the Plutos and the Zumos of the world that have news channels, we're fully on demand. So we don't have that barometer. I mean, obviously we've been following. I have the same information from the trades, I think, that we all have.
Okay.
But what we found is that actually we found news fatigue. I think, we're seeing on our platform that a lot of people are actually looking to escape from constant COVID news, and Tubi, and I imagine Cinedigm as well, has provided a refuge from that.
Very good, very good. Actually, just one quick qualification question for you, Erick. Spencer Bovey was just asking, are Cinedigm's channels or AVOD or any SVOD, any TVOD initiatives? Just let us know what's going on there.
Sure. So we operate some of these under hybrid business models. So we have some of our channels, sort of our flagship Con TV, Dove channel, Docurama, which we 100% own, which we launched in sort of phase one of this whole OTT explosion, about 4 years ago. Those channels started out as, hybrid AVOD, SVOD subscription services direct to consumer, and we still operate those that way today. So we have premium content that's only available to subscribers on those channels, but we operate linear versions of those channels as well across both traditional cable and smart TV, linear on a linear basis. And we're also operating, so today anybody can enter one of our apps on, say, a Samsung Smart TV or an Android device, and you can start watching and consuming a selection of content for free. But if you want, premium, no commercials, and in some cases on some of our channels, we offer non-film and television media. So, for example, Con TV, I have 10,000 digital comics, Star Trek, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, you name it, we've got it, and that's also bundled in. So we're kind of business model agnostic. However the customer wants to access our content, we provide a mechanism for them to do it in the way they prefer.
Very good, and that actually brings up, I think, a really interesting topic that we should talk about. One of the things I was excited to talk to both of you about is you have both slightly different viewpoints of distribution. Distribution strategy, that is. Of course, Tubi is a huge aggregator of content, aggregator of other people's content. Erick, you have obviously original channels. So why don't we start with you, Andrea? Let's talk about your distribution strategy. And please, tell us about the new mobile deal you have with LG devices in US, but I don't want you to just limit yourself to that. Tell us about your distribution strategy and how you go about addressing that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So we are distributed. I guess I'll start with the overarching goal of Tubi is to be the free Netflix alternative, right? What Netflix is for SVOD. Tubi aims to be for the AVOD market. And so in that sense, we want to be the massive aggregator. And we're a tech-first company. We invest heavily in our product, in our machine learning algorithm. And so it's really important that people come into the Tubi application and enjoy our experience when we're surfacing the right content to the right folks. So in that way, we are focused really single-handedly on standalone app distribution. And we're distributed on over 25 platforms. From an AVOD perspective, you need to be everywhere that viewers want to watch, on every device, right? It is a scale. AVOD is all about scale. It's about scale, reaching as many people as you can. And so from our perspective, we are on, at this point, pretty much all major streaming devices, except for a few of the smaller ones. And that's why this LG deal was really interesting for us. LG they're a massive telephone and tablet manufacturer, and we are their AVOD partner, AVOD preload partner in the US and in Canada. And while I can't quote an exact number, it is in the tens of millions of devices over a 2-year period across pretty much all of the major carriers. So we're excited.
Very good. So, Erick, talk to us about your distribution strategy. I know you're working with Tubi, but obviously you have a broader distribution strategy than Tubi. So walk us through that.
Right. So I think my philosophy goes back to my days, running an aggregation company. My philosophy is, for us as a company, we maximize our revenue and our reach by, being as broadly available as we can. So I think we're comparable to Tubi in that respect. I think where we diverge a little bit from Tubi's admirable, relentless focus on AVOD, and they're unabashed. They'll tell you that themselves. They're unabashed. The same way Netflix is unabashedly SVOD, they're unabashedly AVOD. We're unabashedly opportunistic because we're small, and we, relative to some of the biggest players in the market. So, are we doing linear? Yes. Are we doing AVOD? Yes. Are we Are we distributing our channels on third-party platforms like IMDb TV, Amazon channels, pretty much everywhere we can be? And I think, for us, I think, our focus, while we give up some of the, obvious benefits of the direct-to-consumer relationship, I think what we've found is for a company at our maturity and our scale, getting access to the reach that we may not otherwise get by, being baked into a Samsung or a Vizio TV. Maybe we don't maintain a direct one-to-one relationship with the consumer. But for us, we're able to still expand our reach and generate pretty meaningful revenue piggybacking on some very large platforms. So it kind of mirrors a lot of the same consternation that a lot of people had building media businesses on the back of Facebook or YouTube. For us, I think it's we strike a balance between, in this business, there's not any one platform, unlike, say, YouTube or Facebook under some of those publisher models where, they basically have a stranglehold on the market. In this case, there is a pretty broad array of very large platforms and companies, like I mentioned. So there's to date, at least, there's very little risk of that sort of situation. But I think that, it works. The strategy is working out very well for us.
So connected TVs are very important platforms for you both, and very, very important distribution mechanisms for you both. And I really wanted to talk more specifically about the platform for providers, not the smart TVs, but the streaming media players, Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV to a lesser extent. Can you talk about those? Is it different working with those than with the smart TV manufacturers, both of which you're working with? So Eric, why don't you lead off there?
Sorry, the first part of your question, the versus smart TV, who are we comparing to?
I'm thinking more of the streaming media players like Roku box rather than the Roku smart TV, although you can't really separate the two now from the standpoint of content providers. Fire TV, Apple TV, to some extent, I suppose, also Android TV.
Well, I think as you look at pretty much any device manufacturer out there today, look, the margins are incredibly slim on device manufacturing. And when you take into account, adding in increased chipsets, sometimes licensing fees associated with this, the manufacturers to date have made, not a whole lot of money. It was more of a market share play for these manufacturers to get market share. And a lot of this was driven by, Chinese manufacturing, Chinese brands like Hisense and so forth, TCL. But I think, the real challenge that most of these, anybody who's putting glass or, devices out there is there's not much recurring revenue. So I think the goal of most of these guys that have pretty sizable install bases is to find out how can we make more recurring revenue. So I think what we're finding is when we deal with we deal with these companies, whether they're a smart TV manufacturer or set-top box, we're finding we're working with them, both operating direct-to-consumer apps on there, and maybe they're making, a piece of the revenue off of that, or getting access to some ad inventory, or we're licensing them content for a house-branded channel, or maybe they're operating sort of a linear, their version of a house-branded kind of version of Pluto or Zumo, where we're licensing channels in and sharing revenue there. Or maybe they operate their own TVOD service and we're licensing content into that. So I think we're going to find is most of these platforms are going to continue to figure out how to, expand that recurring revenue base because, margins have been increasingly slimmer on the manufacturer of hardware. So
Very
for
good.
providers that can provide more solutions for them, whether it's content channels or even technology services like we do, are going to become increasingly valuable to these players.
Yeah, you bet. So Andrea, talk to us about the streaming media players. Can you, for example, obviously one of the facets of the LG deal on the LG smartphones with mobile is being on the device is really, no download required. There'll be an icon somewhere on the display. Are you able to negotiate those same things with the streaming media players?
Yeah. So, well, I've been in this business for, a long time by digital standards now. And, when I started for Tubi 4 years ago, the only player really, really interested in AVOD was Roku. They got it early, right? They understood that there was money to be made here and that this content was worth promoting and surfacing, and Tubi was a partner worth investing in. And then obviously Amazon caught wind not too long thereafter, and started to realize what a healthy ad business they were building, right? And they too were suddenly incentivized to partner with Tubi to help us grow, right? So those were, obviously two very significant platforms for us for a very long time, and they still are. But interestingly, now we see the smart TV players catching up. To Erick's point, they're understanding that there is a meaningful business to be had on platform and monetizing on platform, and certainly by selling ads. So we see Samsung building their ad sales team. We see Vizio building their ad sales team, among many others. And it's been a great time for AVOD because now those players as well are incented to promote us, to surface us, because they are obviously monetizing with us on an ad in an ad capacity.
Very good. So before we jump into that ad question, I want to bring up one of the questions that somebody's just asked, and I just want to say, Steve LeBlanc, I noticed you entered a question on the chat window. Could you copy that over, please, to the Q&A window? It'll be difficult for us to dig that out. Now, there was a great question here from Jeffrey Stansfield. He says, "Do you think it is better to make an exclusive distribution agreement and get a better price, or distribute on everyone to get more visibility?" It sounds to me like you'd probably edge on the more visibility, guys. Yes or no? Am I wrong? Andrea, why don't you opine first?
Just to that point, we're actually, the world of OTT apps is different than the world of cable. When you say get a better price, we're not like a cable channel where the distributors pay you to be listed on their service. They, the Rokus of the world have ingeniously flipped that model on its head. And so in order to succeed in this business, you need
to be everywhere.
You need to be
everywhere. Erick, you also have SVOD properties. Does that change the equation?
I still, I'm always about ubiquity of distribution. I think, there really isn't an exclusive distribution arrangement that, that has ever been on the table for us that would make a whole lot of sense. And I think, frankly, most of the players in the market, because they're not, because there's not a paid situation, aren't really pushing for that. However, I would say this, some of the content we own, we're in that same dilemma as both a producer and distributor of content as well as a channel operator, where we face the same challenges as like a Viacom or anyone else on a bigger. They have obviously a bigger scale, but we have to decide on any given movie or series that we distribute. Do we license it to Netflix? Do we license it to Amazon? Do we license it to television? Or do we try to reserve it for our own distribution platforms? So far, that discussion has been pretty easy to date because the dollars were so much larger for licensed programming than what we could generate. However, with the growth of our business, we're now starting to say that, should we do shorter windows on these sales or even forego them? And I think as you get bigger, and have more clout in terms of distribution, you can do more of that. So I think that's, as we deal with exclusive, that's where we're thinking about it, more on the individual content side rather than the channels and apps.
Right. I remember that Jason Kilar's last company, whose name's just slipped my mind, they had an exclusive window for ad-supported content for a few days. And yeah, and that didn't work out too well. It didn't seem to work out too well, did it? So why don't we jump in and talk a little bit about advertising now? One of the big things that I thought would happen is that this could be a great boom for AVOD providers online, as TV content, live TV content sort of dried up, and new content on TV really in short supply. I thought this might be a great opportunity for AVOD to begin to grapple with some of those TV dollars. But it looks like there's been a deflation in ad values. Are you seeing that? And what about some of those sports advertising dollars? Are you seeing those coming your way? So Andrea, why don't we start off with you?
Yeah, great question. So I think really at the end of March, we saw kind of similar to what the industry was seeing, right? Traditional big spend advertisers, cruise lines, travel, vehicles, those categories were suddenly pulling ad dollars. But interestingly, we've actually seen a boom in new advertising categories that we've not seen before. Huge buys from food delivery companies, right? Video conferencing services, all of these new kind of normals for the way we're living have really, have jumped for us. And actually, interestingly, at the end of April, we've started to see a lot of those buys that were paused in March turn back on. And this is still a weird time, but we're actually very optimistic. And, on top of all that, we've had an acquisition during all this by an amazing, massive media company, Fox. So revenue-wise, we're in a pretty optimistic position.
Yeah, very good. Mike Vorhaus, thank you for reminding me. Yes, it was Vessel I was thinking of. Vessel was Jason Kilar's previous effort. Erick, ad values, what are you seeing? Are they going up, going down? Are you grabbing extra dollars from sports? What's going on?
Well, so a couple things. So, we're in a unique position where, we haven't fully matured on the platforms we have live in terms of distribution, in terms of maximization of revenue. So our own experience in this market is that we're actually growing revenue, not declining in revenue. But I think that's not necessarily the case for the rest of the industry who may be more mature. I mean, I'm launching new channels and new content. I've launched 2 new channels since we've been in the crisis here. So naturally, I'm gonna have more inventory. But I'll tell you, my perspective is, look, whenever you have a massive increase in demand, that means an increase in impressions. An increase in impressions and a decrease in advertisers looking to fill those impressions generally will mean downward pressure on CPMs and fill rates. That can be somewhat mitigated, and that's overall, right? But then you say, oh, that'll be somewhat mitigated by there's certain elements to the AVOD and digital ad-supported business in general that makes it more resilient. The first being its targetability, right? If you're an advertiser right now and you have regions of the company, some region, if you go to Texas, restaurants are open. Should national restaurant chains want to resume advertising, they need to be able to regionally target. So it's much harder to do fast and effectively through television. You can do it, it's clunkier, but you can deploy and have much more flexibility in regional targeting in a digital way versus traditional models. There's still regional targeting in traditional models, but you can get far more granular, which is exactly what's going to, as we've talked about at county level differences in restrictions, there's new models emerging where you need to be able to target down to county level or neighborhood level, and that's much more possible on digital. So that's number one. The second piece is addressability. When you're thinking about advertising in this environment, the demographics and other attributes of the viewer take on much greater importance. So those two factors means, from a tactical perspective, that AVOD is a very prime place for a faster acceleration of shift of TV dollars into this. Combine that with the really, what I would characterize as a bargain, good pricing right now. The value and features that are attributable to digital advertising make it a really attractive way for companies that have a lot of uncertainty to continue to advertise but not make huge upfront commitments like they're accustomed to. So that's my perspective. That doesn't necessarily reflect the totality of the industry, but that's my perspective on the impact on AVOD.
Awesome. Andrea, so one of the things Erick mentioned was that he's managed to launch a couple of new channels. Have you been launching new stuff during the lockdown? And why don't we? I'm really interested in who's still advertising. Who are the advertisers that are still buying with you? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how they're buying, if you're doing this programmatically or direct sales. But anyway, that's three questions in one, Andrea. Let's start with, anybody have you been launching new content, new stuff?
Great question. Yeah, we have. In fact, some of our best stuff yet, because Fox, right? Game changer. So we've all of a sudden, it started with The Masked Singer, which is, Fox's mega hit show, is now on Tubi. And they're extremely recent episodes, so we're very excited about that. And then we also have a new Gordon Ramsay show that we launched, also from Fox, 24 Hours to Hell and Back. We just announced that. And that's just been in the past 2 weeks. So you can imagine, we've been announcing we've been making these announcements weekly. You can expect that to continue to accelerate and us to continue to partner further with Fox. But then also continue to grow with all of our amazing 200 plus content partners. We are very much still focused on aggressively growing our library. Regarding advertisers, honestly, it has been, and I mean this, it's been the advertisers who are still advertising. I mean, I think it's a lot of the mainstays, insurance, right? We've still got a lot of great insurance advertisers. I mentioned certain categories like automotives were paused, but they're coming back. Where, as I said, totally new categories. I mentioned DoorDash. I mentioned there's a new app, House Party, right? We never heard of House Party advertising. All of a sudden, they're doing a big buy with us. So we are we're doing okay, and I think that's because, to your point, is it programmatic versus direct? A lot of services rely strictly on programmatic advertising. Which has its benefits because you're not building a costly sales team, right? A sales team it takes a certain amount of resources to build and maintain that. But in these cyclical markets, you lack predictability, right? It's sort of, you lack control and you lack predictability. Tubi, we have our own direct sales team. We've had one for years and we've grown it pretty significantly. I don't know the latest total of salespeople. I want to say roughly 30 people. Please don't quote me on that. So that's helped us a lot in terms of maintaining revenues in this otherwise, kind of down market.
Yeah. Erick, who's still advertising with you?
Well, I think, we're seeing, if you look at sort of the categories that, press pause, you're seeing, travel, financial services, automotive, and those were really big spending categories. But you look at what has kind of increased or shifted its focus. A lot of DTC, in particular, drug and commercial product brands like Warby has been increasing some spend. I think we've seen, increases in QSR, fast food. I think a lot of people probably, keep seeing those 450-degree pizza oven commercials that fry the coronavirus. We're seeing those same kinds of ads going. But yeah, I think we've seen a pretty big uptick in some of those categories, and I would say it hasn't offset some of the declines, but we think we've more than made up for that in terms of volume. So we've held our own on that front.
That's great. So this is a bit of an odd question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Obviously, both of you are monitoring the quality of your delivery very closely to make sure you're delivering the highest television quality that people have come to expect now from online providers. Have you seen any problems? Have you had any problems over the last several weeks as we've seen this stepwise increase in the usage of the services? Eric, why don't we start with you, and then I'll move to Andrea.
Yeah. We haven't had any issues. I think we monitor down to the IP level, so we can see patterns that emerge out of regional ISPs, and there's still I'm not saying there aren't problems out there in the industry or with network congestion and other issues, but I think the broadband providers have done. Look, broadband consumption was on the rise anyways, so a lot of companies have been investing and spending ahead of this. We may have, ate into that extra capacity that was going to buy them a couple more years of investment, so they're going to have to continue to invest in network capacity and capability. But we have not seen any major outages or issues related to this increase in bandwidth consumption at all.
Yeah. Andrea, same for you?
Yeah, honestly, it's been pretty incredible. I think to Eric's point, it's testament to the work that the ISPs have been doing. It's a testament to our engineering team who monitors that, down to the hour, right? We're very vigilant about it. And I think what that speaks to is that this industry is here to stay, right? Gone are the days of the spinning wheel of death and the buffering, which was always really kind of a holdback for the entire industry because of, quality concerns. Those days are gone. Even in these times of peak demand, we're rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I was talking to senior architect of Akamai last week, probing him about this exact issue. And that's what he said. He said, no, we've been able to keep pace very well. The one thing he did say was that they've brought forward some of the investment that they were planning to make in their networks going forward. They brought it forward to invest earlier. But no, they've been able to keep up pretty well. So I hope that's the experience of everybody who's been listening. And just a reminder, please copy your questions over into the QA window. Into the QA window. If they're in the chat window, I'm not going to see them, so I won't be able to ask your questions. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, and before we go to open Q&A, I've got one more big question. So, what do we think is going to happen going forward with AVOD? Obviously, we've seen a big stepwise increase in the usage. Do we think that that's going to be sustained going forward? When people go back to work, we'll see a drop, but are we going to settle back at a higher level? So, Andrea, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, 100%. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, the majority of the growth in viewership that we've seen has come from new viewers. That is awesome because, Tubi, we've done a wonderful job with retention. You can imagine that we have a team that is laser focused on how to retain viewers. So the fact that we reach so many new viewers tells me that will view times go down? Are people going to continue watching ridiculous amounts of hours of television all day? Probably not. But will the whole industry go up? Yes, I think so. I don't think we'll settle back to where we were before COVID.
Eric, what do you think?
Look, I think this just accelerates trends that were already in progress. I think I don't think that opening everything up is going. People are going to suddenly go back to the way things were before all this until there's a vaccine. So because of that, people are going to stay home more, which means they're going to continue to consume more. The economy, while I think a lot of people are hoping for a V-shaped recovery, it's probably going to be a little bumpier than that. Which means people are going to be more cost conscious, and that means continued cord cutting, and that means continued adoption of high quality alternatives to paying for things, and that means the ad supported side will probably continue to show an outpaced performance, as will the OTT business in general.
Very good. So, okay, so I'm going to turn to, I have tons more questions, but we also have a lot of questions in the Q&A window, so I do want to get to those. Before we do that, Laura, could we put up the poll? Very good. The poll is there. So I'd like you to start answering the poll as we go through the Q&A, and I want to thank Velocity for sponsoring this poll and for sponsoring our entire discussion. So thank you to them. So one of the things that I didn't get to, which I would have loved to have talked about, is data. And Jeffrey Stansfield has asked, one of the most valuable part of this business is data. What kind of analytic and metadata do you share with your content providers? There's an interesting question. So let's, Erick, let's turn to you first, and then Andrea, I'm sure you've got some interesting feedback here for us. Erick.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to share as much data as you can. I think one of the things I've experienced as somebody who delivers to a lot of platforms is everybody focuses on building the consumer-related features, the apps, the functionality, the capabilities. And they get around to reporting eventually, right? And eventually means some of them haven't got around to it. But I think, if anything, it's incredibly important for platforms in general to provide a high degree of transparency. We do that. Our SaaS platform, Matchpoint, provides an insane amount of data and basis into what's happening on the apps and platforms that content is distributed. There are some limitations because third parties may not always report back the rich level of data you can get out of a direct consumer platform if you're operating one. But generally speaking, we provide, if on the direct consumer side, an incredible amount of data. On third party, we report back what we can get from that third party.
Yeah, Andrea, what do you think? I mean, I imagine you're giving pretty good telemetry since they're sharing in the ad revenue.
Exactly. The key, and I actually, I welcome all of you to do this with any of the providers, the AVOD providers you work with. It is really, really, really important to have fully transparent data in this market, right? Tubi has a real-time reporting portal. That means that in real time you can see, there's a whole bunch of sort of levers that you can sort and filter with, but you can see the revenue you've made on a per title or per episode basis in real time. That means that it's fully transparent, right? There's no, you see what we see. That's really a core part of our business proposition, and more important than in AVOD than I think any other market. We also share a lot of viewership data with our content partners, and really the goal is, when you work with Tubi, you are assigned a content partner manager, right? And that person's job is to share data with you, share learnings, and help you decide what content to put on Tubi, what to experiment with, what to lean into. So when we work with partners, we use data, we share data to learn together to help them grow. And that's what we love to do. We love learning and helping our partners grow.
Well, it sounds like you've got some fans out there. Sat Kaufman just commented in the chat. We know that your data is the best, bar none. So
yes, thank you.
I'll second that. We like I mentioned, we work with about 190 different partners. So if I could give an award to best reporting platform, it would go to Tubi.
Well, we love that. Thank you. That's awesome. And I seriously mean it. You know, when you work with other partners, push them for transparency. It's important because unfortunately other players are not always as transparent as they could or should be.
Now, I've got a question from Steve LeBlanc. He's asking for both of you, with the advent of the mega streamers such as Peacock and HBO that will be involved in AVOD plays, how do your business plans plan to maintain momentum with both advertisers and consumers amidst these impending rollouts? Big competition for ad dollars is coming. How are you going to cope? So
a couple things. You know, we've been monitoring closely. Obviously, Peacock is live only on Xfinity, Comcast Xfinity right now. Tubi has a Comcast Xfinity app. So you can imagine we've been watching the data closely saying, hey, what's happened to our viewership now that Peacock is here? And I'm not joking, our viewership has only continued to grow. So I really do think it's still the very early stages of AVOD. There's a room for a lot of winners here. And so we're certainly, we're not concerned in that regard. And regarding ad dollars, yes, there's more people out in the market. Peacock's done a good job of going out to solicit upfront dollars before all of this COVID craziness. But you know, we've got a wonderful new owner now, so it's definitely a game changer for the Tubi team.
So I've got a quick question. We'll make this the last question. So if you haven't had a chance to fill out the audience streaming poll, please do that now. We'll review those results in just a minute or so. From an anonymous attendee, he wanted to know about does Tubi plan to develop original content? I want to broaden that question just a tad. Will we see major productions coming out of pure AVOD plays? What do we think? Why don't we say, Eric, why don't we start with you and we'll finish with you, Andrea?
I would say it's definitely going to happen because, you know, as a company that co-finances and co-produces original programming, we're in those conversations. We discuss those things with a lot of different parties. And there's a lot of interest in doing that with some players in the market. It's really about, you know, look, if you kind of look at the parallel to, you know, the birth of cable television, you know, it's a you know, a crawl, walk, run, right? It starts out with, you know, stand-up comedy and news shows, you know, talk shows, game shows, and then from there starts graduating up. You know, for cable, it took you know, 15 years to really get to a pretty robust original programming model. I think it's going to happen pretty quickly, just given the consolidation that's happening, you know, and the wherewithal of wealthier parents and the enough amount of eyeballs that make the math start to work. Math didn't work before. So, you know, in that environment, I think it's, you know, it's an inevitability. But I think, you know, it may look different than it looked in previous sort of iterations of this situation on cable.
Very good. Andrea, last word, real quick.
Well, I think to Eric's point, you know, before Tubi, I did a brief stint at Crackle. Back when Crackle was, you know, kind of the leading AVOD service in the market years ago. And they invested heavily in original productions, big, expensive original productions, but the market wasn't there yet. It was too early. Yeah, the monetization wasn't there yet. And we saw kind of how that went. So I think to your point, as more and more ad dollars go to AVOD, our CEO, Farhad, has been very vocal. Tubi will never do originals. We'll never do originals. And I have no basis to comment on all this other than I've always said never's a long time. So that's all I can say. But honestly, I think Eric's correct. As the market matures, I think it's reasonable to expect this from services.
Hi, Ned. Do we have time to take a quick look at the poll answers?
Oh, sure. Let's put up the poll answers. Absolutely.
So are you streaming more? It looks like everybody is about the same or more, which is good news, I think, for both Eric and for Andrea. As the economy restarts, do you think television advertisers will transfer a substantial of ad dollars to TV? And the plurality, 61% say yes. And at least some are coming your way. So that's some good news as well for the AVOD industry. And what are the major impediments to online free ad-supported growth? Well, it looks like a lack of premium content and no standard for measuring success are the two top issues that the industry has to deal with. Thank you. Very interesting feedback from everybody. And I'm going to hand it back over to Ned.
Colin, Andrea, Eric, what a great way to kick off the week. A very engaging conversation today. Exciting what's going on in the AVOD space. No doubt a space that we'll continue to cover here. Let's do lunch. So we have a whole week planned, folks. Our schedule is online. There are links to it. You can go to the Do Expo site. Tomorrow, Vanessa Flaherty of Digital Brand Architects, who oversees a portfolio of fashion, beauty, and lifestyle influencers, will be on the show. So please join us for that. And a big, big thank you to Velocity, who is our sponsor and supporter of the show today. Velocity Media and Entertainment provides a complete industry solution across subscriber and advertising sale lifestyles to fully empower both B2C and B2B digital consumer engagement. Learn more at velocity.com. Thank you, folks. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.